Hi, I'm Christine. At Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood up, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You're getting nothing." My brother smirked. My mother sipped her wine. No one flinched. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. But they had no idea. The company they were celebrating? I already owned it. Do you want to know how I did it? And what I said next? I hadn't been back in a while. Not really. Sure, I'd sent the obligatory gifts, the polite holiday cards, the hope Thanksgiving is warm texts. But to step foot on that porch again, that was something else. The house stood just as I remembered it, white columned, flag flapping sharp in the November wind, hedges trimmed within an inch of their lives. Charleston never changed much, and neither did this house, the kind of place where tradition wasn't just honored, it was enforced. The sun was dipping low. I parked farther down the circular drive, choosing not to pull into the usual spot. It didn't feel mine anymore. Maybe it never was. I was halfway to the door when it opened, not by my mother or my father, but by the housekeeper, Teresa. She smiled kindly, but with that look, the one people give you when they're not sure you belong anymore. Inside, I heard laughter, plates clinking. My name wasn't one of the ones called out. "Marion's here," Teresa announced softly. No one replied. I hung my coat and stepped into the dining room like a guest at my own wake. Seraphine squealed, loud enough to be heard in the next county. Her hug was all perfume and insincerity. "You look so different, still doing that techie business stuff?" Gideon barely looked up from his glass. "Hey," he said, as if he'd passed me on a sidewalk and not grown up under the same roof. My mother, Rowena, gave me a once-over. "Busy life, I assume?" I nodded. "Yes, but good." I looked at the table, long, polished, set with silver and crystal, unchanged. But the name cards had changed. Or rather, one was missing. Mine. I found an empty seat at the end, near the swinging door to the kitchen. No cushion, no card, no mistake. Someone chuckled, an uncle maybe. "We weren't sure you'd show. Thought you'd finally left the tribe." I smiled. Didn't realize I needed permission to come home. Dinner looked like a magazine spread. The plates were the same china from my childhood. The napkins were monogrammed. I used to fold them for my mother when I was little, trying to make them look like leaves. I took my seat at the very end. From here, it felt like I was watching a play I didn't audition for, but was somehow cast in anyway. Near the fireplace, a framed photo caught my eye. The legacy wall, my father called it. Generational Pride. The latest edition, a glossy portrait labeled Crowell Legacy. Everyone was there, except me, Seraphine in her signature red, Gideon in his navy blazer, Rowena, Darius, even the golden retriever. Just not me. The wine was poured, conversation flowed, laughter rose, but somehow the quiet at my end felt heavier than the noise. Darius, my father, stood up, tapped his glass with the confidence of a man used to being listened to. "As of next quarter," he said, "we'll be finalizing the sale of the company." The table stilled. Even the wine seemed to pause. "Gideon will stay on as legacy advisor. The rest, well, you'll be informed." Seraphine had her phone out already, filming his speech for her followers. I raised my glass halfway. "That includes me?" Darius didn't flinch. "There was never a formal position for you, Marion. I thought you knew that." He didn't say it cruelly. That almost made it worse. I didn't drop my fork, didn't storm out, just breathed. Inside, I remembered every call he'd made to me asking how to pivot the brand for younger buyers. Every deck I'd reviewed, every strategy I'd shaped after midnight, unpaid, uncredited, but not unnoticed, at least not by the numbers. I looked around. No one looked back, not even Rowena, who kept swirling her Chardonnay. I remembered designing the first version of the company's social presence on a loaned laptop. I'd sent it to Gideon. He never replied. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Behind Darius, the painting hung, huge, gold-framed, called Generations Forward. I wasn't in it. A younger cousin leaned toward me. They said you were overseas or something. That's why you missed the shoot. I turned to him gently. No, I was never invited. That seemed to puzzle him, but he didn't ask more. They never ask more. I stood to refill my glass, then walked past the wine table and down the hallway toward the study. The doorknob was cold in my hand. I hadn't planned on saying anything tonight. I really hadn't, but something in me uncurled. I held the photo up to the light, wondering who hated me quietly enough to never say it aloud. The ink was hard-pressed. Whoever scratched my face out didn't hesitate. No second thoughts. Just stroke after stroke, like they were erasing something that had never belonged. I slid the photo into my coat pocket and turned back to the study. The room hadn't changed in years. Smelled like leather, old books, a hint of Darius's cologne, everything in its place. Plaques, degrees, shelves lined with business books no one had opened in decades. I'd forgotten how silent the house got once dessert hit the table. I walked around his desk. My old gift was still there, a wooden pen holder I made in college, hidden behind a glass sculpture etched with Leadership Award, Gideon Crowell. That felt about right. My contributions were always just behind his accomplishments, half visible if anyone bothered to look. One drawer was different. New lock, new keyhole. Replaced recently. I opened a cabinet he never used. No lock on that. Inside, 2 slim binders and a folder labeled Strategic Succession. I sat down. The first page hit harder than I expected. Proposed Air Distribution. G. Crowell, CEO. S. Crowell, Communications Brand. M. Vale, External Contributor. No stake. No stake, not no desire, not qualified, just out. I flipped through the pages, pitch decks, equity models, org charts with Gideon's face where I used to imagine mine. The date on the front. Same month I anonymously funneled funds into the company during a liquidity crisis. I kept that quiet, never even hinted. They'd taken the help and left me out of the thank you note. I wasn't sad. I wasn't shocked. I was clear. The door creaked behind me. Seraphine's voice floated in like she owned the oxygen in the room. Didn't know Dad kept your old proposals. He's sentimental. I turned slightly, kept the file closed, didn't offer her a seat. You know, she said, digging in with that syrupy smirk, you've always had that assistant energy. Helpful, but not quite management. I didn't blink. I didn't let her see the sting. She tilted her head. No offense. I slid the folder back into the cabinet. No offense taken, I said, calm as lake water before a storm. She lingered, waiting for me to bite. I didn't. Eventually she left, heels clacking down the hall like punctuation. I stayed in the room a while longer. Memories came in waves. Me at 10, holding up a certificate from school. Gideon's went on the fridge. Mine ended up in a drawer, next to expired coupons and old batteries. Don't expect too much, Marion, my mother once said. That way you won't get disappointed. That's how I'd lived most of my life, setting the bar low and smiling when I cleared it. It didn't protect me. It made me disappear. Earlier tonight, someone had mistaken me for Seraphine's assistant, an investor. She hadn't corrected him. Just smiled and nodded and said, she helps with logistics. And Mom, during dinner, when that uncle made his usual dig about leaving the tribe, she didn't say a word, just poured herself another glass like the wine had answers I'd never earned. These moments looped in my head, quiet as a record spinning under dust. Not screams, not shouts, just silence. And that silence screamed everything. I left the study and walked upstairs. My old bedroom smelled like cedar and forgotten ambition. Nothing had been touched. Trophies, sketches, a broken clock that still sat on 317, frozen on the day I left for good. I dropped onto the bed and opened my laptop. Logged into an account I hadn't used in a while. One that didn't bear my name but had my fingerprints all over it. Vendor contracts, SEC filings, silent partnerships, supplier equity splits. I started pulling everything. This wasn't for revenge. This was for air. For space to breathe again without needing anyone to approve it. They wanted legacy. I'd show them what legacy actually meant. Printer clicked on. 3 pages. On page 2, it jammed. I opened the tray. There, wedged between the rollers, was a photo I hadn't seen in over 20 years. Thanksgiving, maybe 1998. Everyone was there. Darius at the head, Rowena smiling too wide, Gideon holding the wishbone, Seraphine in velvet, and me, off to the side, holding a plate, eyes half closed. My face was crossed out in thick black ink. No caption, no date, just an unspoken message. The house had gone quiet again, plates cleared, dessert served, voices now muffled somewhere near the back patio where the family always migrated after a showy meal. I didn't follow them. I climbed the stairs instead, slow, deliberate steps, like I was pacing back into a version of myself I thought I'd outgrown. My old bedroom was untouched. Not in a nostalgic way, in a staged, frozen-in-time kind of way. The bedspread still had the stitched initials my grandmother had sewn when I was 14. On the shelf, a first-place science fair ribbon was pressed into a frame like it had ever mattered. A finger painting from 2nd grade hung crooked by the window. Nothing had been added, but I'd been removed. The desk sat against the far wall. Oak. A drawer that used to jam when I pulled it open. I remembered needing both hands and a small curse to get it loose. Tonight, it slid like butter. Inside was nothing at first. Then I noticed a false panel in the back, barely held with tape. Behind it, a faded folder, no label, no dust. I opened it, and there I was, an old will, 12 years old. Marion Vale, equal heir, written in my father's hand. 2 pages down, notes in my mother's slanted script. Edits, crossouts, arrows pointing toward Gideon's name, a question mark next to mine. No further comment. 6 months after this version, the final document was signed. The one I saw last night. The one where I didn't exist. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd deleted me. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the folder like it weighed more than paper. My chest was still. I wasn't crying. That would have made sense 10 years ago. Not now. I thought about all the years I'd built my own life, thinking maybe, just maybe, I hadn't tried hard enough to be seen. Turns out, I was never invisible. I was inconvenient, and they fixed that with a pen. I didn't lose a seat at the table, I said out loud. I lost the belief that I ever had one. I slid the folder back where I found it. Not to hide it, just not time yet. Some things you don't reveal while you're still bleeding. Earlier today, my mother had introduced me to an investor as Megan. I stood there. She corrected herself after half a beat, laughed. Sorry, Marion, we've had so many staff over the years. Everyone smiled politely. I didn't. Because that name, Megan, wasn't just a slip. It was memory. Megan had been our housekeeper when I was in high school. Wore her hair in a tight bun, smelled like lemon pledge, always gave me peppermint when she saw I was upset. I wasn't insulted because I was mistaken for the help. I was insulted because in my mother's mind, that's the only place I still fit. Somewhere on the outside. Not family, not business, just background. That wasn't new. They'd been unnaming me for years. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and set it on the floor, not to leave, to work. From the lining, I pulled my laptop, my notepad, and a slim drive, Booted everything up and opened my folders, contracts, vendor records, ownership filings, communications between anonymous holding companies, companies I built, funded, and ran under aliases to stay clear of family meddling. I began organizing, sorting timelines, connecting names to assets, preparing. This wasn't revenge, this was structure. You erased my name from the will, I said, my fingers steady over the keys. Let's see how well you erase my footprint from the company. I compiled 3 pages. Not everything, just enough to establish position. Leverage isn't in the full truth. It's in just enough truth to make them sweat. I hit print. Page 1, page 2, page 3. Jammed. I opened the tray, ready to curse quietly. Inside was a photo. Old, familiar. Thanksgiving, long ago. I was maybe 11. Standing by the hutch, plate in hand. Darius at the head, Rowena next to him, Seraphine grinning wide, Gideon raising a glass, me, half cut out by the camera's edge. And someone had scratched a line through my face. Not a mark, a line, like it was on purpose. No one signed it. No one needed to. I stared at the picture longer than I should have. Then my phone buzzed. One message. No name. You shouldn't be digging. Some ghosts prefer to stay buried. The next morning came too fast. I hadn't slept much, just paced the hallway outside my room until my heels ached and my throat was raw from swallowing back everything I hadn't said the night before. Still, I showed up early to the showroom, dressed in a dark suit that said, "I'm not here to be cute." They were already setting up. Florals everywhere. Crystal glasses polished. A digital screen looping the Crowell timeline, except it skipped every year I touched something meaningful. I found my name nowhere. Not on the schedule, not on the event placard, not in the guest remarks. The MC, a local news anchor with too much charm and not enough curiosity, stepped onto the stage and read from his card. Today, we celebrate the visionaries of Crowell Sons, the foundation of our legacy, Mr. Darius Crowell and his exceptional children, Gideon and Seraphine. The audience clapped. I didn't. I stood in the back, behind a column, watching them take credit for what I built, what I saved. The lights dimmed. A presentation came up. Bold letters, branded edges, confident tone. I knew it before the title even flashed. Strategic Vision, Gideon Crowell. The deck was mine, my draft. The pitch I crafted 7 years ago for a digital expansion that Gideon had called Unfocused. I saw my opening slide, my formatting, the tagline I scribbled into a leather notebook one night when I was still naive enough to think contribution meant inclusion. He'd copied it, presented it, branded it, and they clapped. The room swelled with applause like it was church and he'd just saved souls. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I sat in the back and let the heat crawl up my spine. Not shame, not jealousy, just fury. Silent, sharp, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that plans. After the panel, I didn't linger. I found Seraphine near the photo booth, pretending to sip champagne. Her lipstick was too red for morning, and her eyes scanned like she was always looking for someone more important to talk to. I didn't ask politely. That campaign was mine. She blinked, slow, then smiled. You weren't using it. Gideon needed the boost, she added, softer. I didn't move. You're not even part of the company anymore, Marion. What difference does it make now? It makes a difference because I'm still here, I said, flat. You just stopped looking. She laughed like I was cute. I walked away. I made my way toward the dessert table. That's when I saw it. A looping video montage playing behind the dessert tower. Family moments, snapshots, all set to a soft piano track. A photo came on, black and white. A child sewing with an older man, my grandfather. I knew the photo. I was the child. except the caption read, "Young Gideon with his mentor, legacy in the making." My hands went cold. They didn't just remove me from the narrative, they rewrote it, with my face, my memory, my moment, and nobody noticed, because the lie was packaged neatly, wrapped in branding, framed by family, and sold to the public. I stepped outside, ignored the buzzing phone in my pocket, let the air bite at my face. They hadn't just erased me. They restitched the whole story around me like I never existed, like I was just a ghost in the background of someone else's movie. I thought about something I heard once. When they forget your name, they're hoping you forget your power. That's what this was. Not oversight, not miscommunication. It was orchestration. And it ends now. No more quiet dignity. No more hoping someone would step in and correct the narrative. My silence ends here. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "Eloise," I said, "I need access to every vendor and every archived contract tied to the 2015 pitch cycle. Especially those with digital initiatives, and I need it today." I named 2 partners who'd been in the room when I originally presented. People who remembered. "I'm not looking to sue," I added, "but I'm going to make sure the record is straight. If they want to lie in public, I'm going to own the truth in private. Facts don't need applause, they just need to be documented." I was about to leave when a voice stopped me. It was soft, hesitant. A junior employee, one of the new hires I didn't know by name yet, approached with cautious steps. She looked around like she wasn't supposed to be speaking to me. Then she slipped something into my hand. A USB drive. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered. "But the original footage had your name." I looked at her. Just once. Then nodded. She walked off without waiting for thanks. I held the drive tightly and said, half to myself, half to whatever part of me still doubted, "I knew it." Back in the guest room, I shut the door and locked it without thinking. Not out of fear, habit. The kind you form after realizing too many times that privacy is never a given, even in your own house. I dropped my bag on the chair, pulled the USB from my coat, and placed it beside the laptop. I didn't open either. Not yet. My body needed a moment to catch up with everything else. The room was too quiet. No clinking glasses, no scripted speeches, no fake smiles. Just the sound of an old ceiling fan humming like it had seen too much but was too tired to care. Seraphine's voice still rang in my head. "You weren't using it anyway." That's how they saw me. Not as a person. A placeholder. A tool. Something useful. Until I wasn't. 5 years ago, the company almost collapsed. Gideon had talked our father into expanding too fast. New lines, new stores, no safety net. The books looked clean from the outside, but I saw the cracks. I wasn't living in Charleston then. I had my own business, a different name, different zip code, but I still checked the filings. Old habits. I caught the dip before it made the news, watched them scramble behind closed doors, desperate for investors. I created an LLC in Delaware, masked through 2 layers of shell companies, and funneled cash into the supplier contracts. Quietly, anonymously, I saved them. The money was mine, earned, taxed, untraceable to the family. And I did it not because I wanted thanks, but because I still cared. Some part of me back then still thought saving the name meant saving something inside me too. Darius never knew. Gideon got praised for pulling us back from the brink. I never corrected it. That silence. It's what gave them permission to keep erasing me. Later that afternoon, I called Eloise. She answered fast, like she knew I wouldn't be calling just to chat. "What's up?" she asked. "I'm not suing," I said first. "That's not what I asked. I'm just tired," I replied. "Tired of playing polite. Tired of being deleted, she paused. So what are you trying to do? Win their approval? Or take back your power? Neither, I said. Silence hung there for a second. I'm just done pretending I was never here. Eloise exhaled. Then stop saving them, Marion. Let it break. That line hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because maybe I had been holding it up all along. I opened the drawer by the window, looking for some old campaign drafts I had stashed years ago. Instead, I found a small box wrapped in gold foil. I knew it immediately. It was the birthday gift I mailed Darius 6 months ago. Inside, a photo of him and my grandfather. Black and white. Framed with care. I'd written, "For the man who built something worth remembering." The envelope was unopened, scrawled across the back, "Unknown sender." They'd returned it. I stared at it for a while. Then I smiled. Not the kind of smile people see, the kind that hurts your throat because it knows the truth. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They knew exactly who sent it, and they sent it back anyway. I spent the next 2 hours building a digital timeline. Every contribution, every email, every dollar moved from my hands to theirs. Every idea, every file, every time I helped, off the record, unpaid, unthanked. It wasn't about dragging them through the mud. It was about writing myself back into the story. I labeled each document, precise, date-stamped, linked to filings, contracts, delivery logs. This wasn't petty. This was structure. I named the master folder Crownless, because that's what I'd been, a queen without a throne, but not anymore. When the last file uploaded, I closed the laptop and leaned back. For once, I didn't feel like I was waiting. And that's when the notification came through. New calendar invite. Subject: Executive Leadership Transition Discussion, Crowell Sons. Sender: Lucius Brandt. Below the title it said, Attendees: Darius Crowell, Gideon Crowell, Board of Advisors, Guest Observer, Marion Vale. Guest Observer. I stared at the invite. That was their first mistake. I arrived early, just to avoid another conversation with anyone who still believed I needed to prove I belonged. The receptionist blinked at her screen when I gave my name. Then she smiled that polite, tight-lipped way people do when they're reading something they know is going to insult you. Your badge isn't active anymore, she said. You're listed as a guest observer. I'm so sorry. She wasn't sorry. I didn't argue. I opened my laptop on the sleek glass counter and pulled up a vendor agreement, one of many contracts tied directly to me. Supplier flow, logistics, quarterly payments. 38% of the company's material sourcing came through channels I controlled. I forwarded it to Lucius Brandt, copied legal, and stood there long enough for the message to ping read. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for a new badge. I waited. Lucius showed up 10 minutes later, all easy charm and rolled back sleeves like he'd just stepped off a yacht and into this mess by accident. Marion, he said, tone smooth. We thought you wanted distance. Distance isn't absence, I said. And silence isn't consent. He gestured toward the hallway like we were old friends just catching up. I didn't follow. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he offered, voice lower now. And you're forgetting who owns your cotton blend contract, I answered. For the first time, he blinked. That's when I knew he hadn't read the attachment yet. He would. And when he did, he'd find that not only did I hold supplier rights, but I'd also quietly acquired exclusive shipping routes under a secondary LLC. I smiled without warmth. We both know I'm not here by accident. He didn't respond. I left him standing there. The last time I sat in a boardroom with Darius and Gideon, I pitched a dynamic inventory model. My father had listened with that same blank smile he used when he was ignoring people at charity galas. When I finished, he looked at Gideon and said, That's cute. but our buyers trust tradition. 6 months later, Gideon presented the same model under a new name, the Hudson Protocol. They ate it up. They always did. That day, I knew. If they didn't want my voice at the table, I'd stop asking for a seat. I'd build something they'd never see coming. By evening, I was at the gala. I wasn't invited, not formally, but no one stopped me. The coordinator searched for my name at the entrance and came up empty. "We can maybe squeeze you near the hallway or at the end with the catering staff?" I didn't answer. I walked past the check-in and stood directly under the spotlighted logo that my firm, my team, had designed years ago. They'd used it without credit. Again. Gideon gave his speech with the confidence of someone who never had to earn anything in a room that always clapped for him. His words, some of them mine, lifted from an old vision proposal, floated through the room like recycled air. I didn't interrupt. I didn't toast. I stood there holding a drink I never sipped and watched. People glanced at me. No one greeted me, not even family. It was fine. That was the last time I planned to show up uninvited. Clarity doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it arrives like a weight lifted. I stepped outside, pulled out my phone, and texted Eloise. "Prepare phase 2, I wrote. I'm done being polite." That's all she needed. Back in my suite, I opened the document labeled Restructure Aurora Model. 22 pages of everything they didn't see coming. A blueprint to rebuild the entire structure of Crowell Sons under a new holding entity. Every line item, every vendor, every title repositioned. New departments, new brand story. Same bones, different blood. My fingerprints were everywhere. I changed the title to SH by Marion Vale, Draft 1, and hit save. That's when it came through. Encrypted message, no subject, just a notification. I opened it. Message body. "They're preparing something. You need to see this," from Anonymous. The video loaded slowly, like it knew what it carried. Family footage, do not share. I clicked play and leaned in. It was a press event, one I remembered because I'd led it. I saw myself at the podium, hair pulled back, black blazer, voice calm as I walked through a campaign strategy that turned around the brand's declining engagement that year, the same one now credited to Gideon. I watched Darius in the background. He leaned over to the PR guy, smiled, and said plainly, "Make sure her name's not on the final cut." The video kept playing, but I hit pause. There was no heartbreak, no surprise, just a silence I had grown too comfortable with. "You didn't just cut me," I whispered to the screen. "You buried me." Another ping. An email chain, forwarded anonymously. Subject, Marion's interference. Darius again. "She's an external party. Let's handle her with PR control." Sent 2 days before I came home. 2 days before the invitation, the speeches, the seating chart with my name missing. They hadn't planned to include me. They'd planned around me, hoping I'd stay quiet, hoping I'd behave. That wasn't oversight. That was strategy. I found Rowena in the kitchen, rinsing a wine glass that had already been cleaned twice. "Did you know about the first will?" I asked. She looked down, then nodded. "I kept the original," she said. "I thought maybe things would change again." I waited. "You could have told me." Rowena set the glass down. "I wanted to, but I wasn't strong enough. I convinced myself that silence was safer than truth." "That's what you always do, Mom," I said. "You stand still and call it peace." She didn't defend herself. As I turned to walk away, I added, "Your silence spoke louder than anyone's voice ever could." And for the first time, she didn't follow me. The garden was dark. I sat on the same patio swing where I used to listen to my grandfather talk about what this family used to mean, what it could have meant. They'd spent years resizing me, editing me, giving me just enough room to feel included, never enough to matter. But something shifted. I thought about that line again. When they don't write you into the story, write your own and publish it. This wasn't revenge, not anymore. This was authorship. I didn't want my seat back. I wanted to rebuild the table with a different name carved into it. Back upstairs, I opened a new draft. Internal memo. Undisclosed ownership stakes, intellectual property, reclamation, Marion Vale. I attached the footage, the supply chain reports, the timelines. I set the send date for 2 days from now, right before the next board meeting. Then I uploaded a copy to an external cloud and labeled it simply, Proof. I didn't rush. I didn't gloat. I moved like someone who had been underestimated long enough and was done asking for permission to exist. At midnight, I found an envelope outside my door. No name, just mine written in careful, slow cursive. Inside was a photo, me and Grandpa, sewing. One of the few times I remember being proud to be a Crowell. Behind the photo, a note. You were always the one who didn't need permission. I just wish I'd been brave enough to follow you. It was signed, Rowena. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. But something in me cracked open, like an old window that had rusted shut. I began packing, not to leave, but to prepare. I folded clothes, slid documents into folders, charged backup drives. My phone buzzed. A message from Gideon. You'll regret this. Family isn't built on facts, it's built on loyalty. I stared at the screen. Then I deleted the message, not because I didn't believe him, but because I finally didn't care. I woke up before my alarm. No dreams, no racing thoughts, just clarity, a kind of stillness that only arrives when you know the battle isn't looming anymore. It's already started. I put on the navy suit my father once called a bit too Wall Street for a daughter. The fabric had structure. It held my spine straighter than any family name ever had. I carried one thing into the building, my laptop, and a sealed envelope from Rowena, still unread. When I stepped into the lobby of Crowell Sons, the guard who used to double-check my ID nodded once. My name was on the list this time. They'd done the paperwork, signed the contracts, opened the boardroom, never realizing I was the buyer waiting on the other side of the ink. Let them play legacy. I rebuilt the table. The conference room had a plaque by the door. Legacy founders, Darius Gideon Crowell. Funny thing was, I owned the building now. Through a shell company I'd set up 3 years ago, the deed had transferred quietly. I paid the property tax under a generic LLC name. Darius never noticed. I stood in front of the plaque for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Then I pulled out my phone, sent a message to legal, and filed the transfer under my public holding company. Let them walk into a room that still had their names etched in gold. They didn't know the roof above their heads now answered to me. The meeting started like any other. Lucius moderated. Darius gave opening remarks. Gideon smirked more than he spoke. Then Lucius introduced the acquisition update. We're pleased to announce the final stages of a legacy-protecting transition. Crowell Sons will partner with Aurora Holdings to ensure generational sustainability. That was my cue. I cleared my throat, stood up, and said it. I am Aurora Holdings. Silence. Not confusion, recognition. Gideon dropped his pen. Darius sat still, like someone had unplugged his power source. Lucius looked at me like he was doing math he didn't want the answer to. I opened my laptop, pressed play. The room filled with the audio of my pitch. The one from years ago. The one Darius dismissed. The one Gideon rebranded. They listened to it again. But this time, it came from my device. From my lips. From my ownership. Darius stood up, voice tighter than usual. This is manipulation. You lied to your own family. I didn't flinch. No, I said. I gave you a chance to see me. You closed your eyes. I listed what I controlled. Out loud. 38% of the supply line. Majority stake in Westbridge Retail. Full control of every digital platform tied to the Crowell name. I looked at the board. I'm not here to destroy this brand. I'm here because I'm the only one who knows how to save it. They voted, majority in my favor. Gideon abstained, his way of playing neutral when he knew he'd already lost. I sent out the press release from my seat at the table. No press conference, no headlines, just one line. Crowell Sons is now a division of Vail Holdings. The logo on the big screen updated in real time. Afterward, I walked the showroom hallway alone. Workers were already updating the wall plaque. It now read, S.H. by Marion Vail. A junior staffer passed by, eyes wide. Should we change the signage for the gala too? I smiled. No. Let them see both names, what was and what is. Back in my office, mine officially, I opened Rowena's envelope. Inside was a napkin, folded into a leaf. Same style I used to fold at Thanksgiving as a girl. The kind she once told me looked messy. This one was faded, delicate. Kept. There was a note. You've always made things beautiful, even when they didn't deserve it. I framed the napkin, not out of sentiment, out of truth. Because sometimes you keep the scar visible, not because it still hurts, but because you survived it. A knock. My assistant stood in the doorway, nervous. There's something wrong with the Foundation's books. You need to see this. I didn't react. I stood up, slow, calm. There's always one more secret, isn't there? The morning after the announcement, I sat across from my new CFO in the small glass office that now had my name on the door. She pulled up the Foundation's financials, part of our transition audit, and paused at a flagged line. $180,000 marked as consulting, she said, but no vendor ID, no payment trail that clears. I leaned in, scanned the details. Fake invoices, dummy account. The money traced back to Gideon, a shell corporation he'd used once before during the 2018 expansion. I didn't say a word. I opened a new folder, titled it Repaid in Reputation, and documented everything. Screenshots, memos, internal approvals signed off by Lucius. No confrontation, no public shaming. Just a quiet line drawn in ink, permanent and legal. I would not let their mess become my mess. Later that afternoon, I walked through the company's media archive. The old server room was stuffy, dim, but still running. I found the file fast, Legacy Montage, Draft A. I played it. There I was, my name spoken, my face present, my work honored. Clips of my first campaign launch, awards I never accepted publicly. Grandpa and I in the workshop, hands full of thread and chalk. The version they erased, the version that should have been released. I forwarded it to the new media director with one line. Restore truth. Quietly. No press release, no announcement. Just facts, corrected. I called Gideon in. He arrived wearing a look I'd seen on Darius too many times. Arrogance stretched thin over nerves. I didn't yell. I handed him 2 documents, the resignation letter and a payment plan. Choose one, I said. He sat across from me, no swagger left. You want blood? No, I said. I want accountability. He signed the resignation letter, pen barely scratching the page. As he stood, he muttered, You became the storm. I met his eyes. I was the sky. You never looked up. Before the workday ended, Rowena showed up at my door with a worn box in her hands. I cleaned out your father's study, she said. Inside were clippings, old letters, one envelope with my name written in the handwriting I knew better than my own. Dated 10 years ago, I opened it. You saw the future before we could let go of the past. I see it now. I see you. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. The following week, we hosted a dinner. No tuxedos, no stage, no speechwriters, just long tables, simple lights, warm food. Everyone who made the company run was there. Designers, janitors, warehouse drivers. They sat side by side, laughing like they hadn't been seen like this before. The napkins were folded like leaves. Every seat had a name card. Mine said, Marion Vale, founder. And for the first time, the name felt whole. As dessert was served, the lights dimmed. The screen lit up with the restored montage. There I was, 10 years old, sewing with Grandpa. The final frame didn't show the company logo. It just read, "Legacy is not inherited, it's built, stitch by stitch." There was applause. No standing ovation. I didn't need one. Lucius retired quietly. Seraphine took a job with a startup in Austin, something about holistic branding. Rowena now volunteers at a nonprofit helping women return to work after family leave. I visited Grandpa's grave with the napkin leaf framed under my arm, set it down beside the stone. "We made it," I said, not as a whisper, as a fact. And as I walked away, I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind, just carrying it forward. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's walking with the scar and choosing not to bleed on anyone. The office was quiet that night. I turned off the lights, took one last look at the framed napkin, then spotted something on the desk. A letter. Plain envelope. No handwriting except 2 words. From Darius. I didn't open it. I filed it under unfinished. Then I locked the door behind me and walked out into the hallway, not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as the one who rewrote the ending.